why me is a downward spiral question. And it was an inquiry that was leading me darker and darker and darker. When we get to embrace or choice in the matter, every gift that the adversity held can be released. And that there's some profundity to that. That is where life gets magical. The adversity, the circumstances that we would never have chosen for ourselves, the gifts that they can bestow. They only bestow them when we're the author of the experience. Fear's just another one of those hurdles, and we can own all those parts of ourselves and share them so beautifully.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Flow Over Fear. I'm so glad you're here today. My guest is Cheryl Hunter, and this was a powerful interview because the story that Cheryl shares with me today seems unreal, but it is real. And it's her experience. It's the type of experience that we don't wish on anyone. But because she shares it, she shows that there is hope beyond hopelessness, and she shares it courageously. As a teenager, she was abducted, held captive, and left for dead. But in telling her story, she has helped others to find healing beyond their trauma. And even more than that, ultimately build the platforms to share their own stories to a broader audience. She has told her story on outlets including People Magazine, Dr. Phil, NBC News, Dr. Oz, CNN, Fox, PBS, and more. Cheryl believes in the potential that the right message has to change the world. So in addition to writing and producing for HBO, CBS, and Paramount Pictures, Cheryl and her team of major media gatekeepers help mission-driven experts leverage the power of major media to get their message, story, and business known by millions. She also has what has become one of my favorite TEDx talks called Wabi Sabi, the Magnificence of Imperfection. Just that name alone is beautiful, right? So please watch that TED Talk and bring the tissue. But in the meantime, enjoy this interview with Cheryl Hunter. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our show. I am glad you're here. And Cheryl, I am so glad you're here. And that I mean, in more ways than one. I mean, just not that you're here, but that you're here, because it could have been so much different based on your story. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Adam, I really get the distinction that you're talking about there. And when we face adversity, it comes to that proverbial fork in the road, and it really can go one of two ways. And it becomes very obvious that
absolutely, if
we continue down a particular path, it's not gonna end well, or it will end. Just not
right,
well.
Right. Well, it's, I mean, yeah, your story, and I want to get into it too, is powerful from a variety of, it's tragic, it's hopeful, it's beautiful, it's terrible, all of these things at the same time if you put it all together. And I will say that, I watched your TED Talk leading up to this interview, and I will say that it is one of the most impactful TEDx talks I've ever seen. I don't cry a lot during TED Talks, but this was one where it was, you're an incredible speaker, and you share your story so powerfully, which is really why we're here, and really what you're doing now is the storytelling aspect. And for people that want to hear more about Cheryl's story, your story, I would encourage them to watch that TED Talk too. Encourage to learn more. But can you share a little bit about your origin story? You grew up not far from where I am right now, Colorado. Give us a little background on where you came from.
I grew up on a horse ranch on the edge of the San Isabel National Forest, which is the biggest national forest in Colorado, but it's super remote. Mm-hmm. The little towns that I'm from between San Isabel and Rye, even Coloradans are like, where?
That's what I was saying.
How far is that from Denver? Oh, right. Like 3.5 hours, like just middle of nowhere. It was, with the exception of planes that flew overhead, there were no signs of civilization from our ranch. I mean, it was so remote that it could have been any time in history, right? I would lie on the ground in the horse meadows and just look up at the sky and see the planes going by and think to myself, man, I want to be the girl in the plane looking down at the girl lying on the ground. I'd have to be to be going places like that, though. I'd have to be able to provide something for people, to help them in some way. And I really couldn't think of any way to help people other than I knew how to ride horses very well. But I mean, I had a coach and a trainer. So I was like, I'm not the best at that. I don't know what I could do. But I just used to dream of the day when I could figure that out. It was a perfect place to live as a little kid. I mean, it was just the imagination ran wild. It was so remote. But as I got to be a teenager, and I wanted to wear the clothes I saw in magazines or TV or movies. I want anything other than, just cowboy boots that were covered in
Right.
the evidence of mucking out stalls all day.
Right.
And, just like I meet people that I wasn't actually related to by blood. And I thought, man, I got to get out. I don't know where or how or what, but there's got to be a way to figure out how to get in the world. And my parents were in the midst of a divorce and not talking a lot to one another. And I was, in that devious mind of a teenager, I was like, ha ha ha, I could use this to my advantage. And they're not talking to one another. I could kind of pull the wool over their eyes. Oh, God, in retrospect, what on earth? But I'd gotten a Glamour magazine one day. I played hooky, telling myself it was a career day, planning for my future. I got a Glamour magazine in the nearest town, and there was an article about how they were always looking for models. And I had no designs on being a model. That, like, who cares? But it seemed like, well, there's no modeling in San Isabel or Rye, Colorado for sure. So I'd have to go someplace where they need models. I was tall enough. I was on the boys basketball team. I thought that yes, this is my ticket out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, where on earth do they need models? Well, where's fashion come from? I guess Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
This was how well thought out the plan was. Not particularly. I wrangled my best friend into going on a trip with me. We worked multiple jobs to save up money, and the big day finally came. And no sooner do we get to France than there is a man with a large camera around his neck, looked all fancy. It was days before we had cameras on every device, right?
Sure. Right.
And he says, "Hey, are you a model? I can make you one. Just come with me and my friend over here," this huge guy standing along the wall. And I thought, man, do you see how great my plan was? That's how easy it is to become a model.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I just showed up and they walked up to me.
They're right there. Yeah. Off the plane. Yeah.
Who's better than me? Come on.
Right.
This is brilliant. What a great plan. Now, my best friend was like over my dead body, but she wanted to go home afterward. And I did not. I wanted to find a way to stay in the big city. I didn't care which big city, just any city. Any city. So I ditched her and I went with them.
You were 17 at the time? Was that, how old were you?
I was 18.
18. Mm-hmm.
They asked me if I wanted wine, and I wanted to be clear for the photos. So I was like, oh, no. Let's just take the photos. And they were like, don't be a stupid American. And do you want cocaine? And I was like, no, I'd never seen a drug in my life. I was so naive and sheltered.
Right.
And they gave me this envelope. I mean, envelope is like a foil packet that was like folded over. And it was this light brown, dusty powder. And I thought, okay, I wasn't allowed to watch Scarface or any movie like that. And I don't know much, but I know that I don't think cocaine is white, and I didn't take it, and I didn't know what it was, but I presume they put that, they finally said, "You just have wine." And I had wine. And the next thing I know, I wake up and I'm in the front seat of a car with my head kind of leaning out the window like a dog with my tongue out.
My gosh. Wow. Yeah. And so they were taking you somewhere.
Yeah, they took me, and I was so naive. I kept thinking we were going to shoot the photos. And so throughout this whole ordeal, they ended up taking me to this abandoned construction site place. And I kept saying, when are we going to take the photos? When are we going to take the photos? They beat the crap out of me. And I mean, I grew up wrestling steers and breaking and training horses and bucking bales. And I was fairly tough. I could drive a tractor trailer. I wasn't like a weakling, but they beat the hell out of me, tortured me. You can fill in all the gory details with your mind, but I just kept asking, when are we going to shoot the photos? Like, this shit was going to end. And somehow we were going to miraculously go to a photo shoot. I just kept asking. And of course, whenever I would ask, this guy would just kick me in the head and beat the crap out of me. And I have this recollection of lying there, and I was on the cement floor and in this water. I mean, they tried to drown me. They just, every kind of torture you could think of. And I remember lying there talking to God and saying, if you let me be free, I'm going to be such a good person. I'm going to be nice to my little brother and sister. I won't talk back to my parents. My grandma used to try to hold my hand whenever we would go places, and she would take me to the mall. She wanted to, in Pueblo, the nearest town. And she'd always want to go do things she thought I would think were fun. But everywhere we'd go, she'd want to hold my hand. And I was thinking, oh my God, at that age, you don't want to be singled out as anything different. And I was saying to God, I will hold my grandma's hand every time she wants to hold my hand. I will be a good girl. And then, just let me be free. And then for whatever reason, they decided they were going to let me go. It was just like 1 minute to the next.
Huh.
And pushed me in this car. And it was a Mercedes. I'd never been in a Mercedes. So, I rode around in F-150s, tractors and pickup trucks and like that. And I was thinking to myself, oh, I've been in a Mercedes now. I mean, my God, such a child I was, so naive. And finally, they pushed me out on this piece of grass. No idea why they took me, why they let me go. But here I am, lying there in this hump on the ground, just this flump of human being. And before he drives away, the one with the camera goes, darling. Like, darling?
Mm-hmm.
I look back over my shoulder and he starts snapping photos.
Oh my God.
And he drove away and I pretended to be dead. I mean, like, that's how much real world skill I had, in the world of coping strategies. I literally pretended that I was dead.
Yeah.
Until he drove away, and then I got up and ran for my life. And the funny thing about it, Adam, was, that whole time I was there and praying, God, just let me be free. Just let me be free. I'll be happy. I'll be a good person. Then I'm suddenly free. And the most unlikely thing happened, which was there was a new kind of captivity. A captivity of the mind. Like I was suddenly captive to my own thoughts. First about, I'm ruined. I couldn't get the thoughts of what had happened out of my head, but that if anyone ever found out, they would know that I'm filthy and ruined and used up. You know, for a while, I thought people would be able to see it on me. I mean, I was bruised. I was bloody. I was cut up. They chopped my hair off, for God's sakes. But I thought if someone came near enough, they could like sense it on me or smell it on me. So the first kind of level of captivity of the mind was just, I cannot let anybody ever find out what had happened, or they'll know I'm ruined and an idiot because I did that to myself. I went. But I just, my mind was filled with just thoughts of revenge. How am I going to get back at these sons of bitches and make them pay? And I just couldn't think about anything else. I had no idea there was such a thing as being captive in your own mind, but I had to find a way to stop that suffering. It wasn't going to allow me to just live. And the best I could come up with in terms of, coping strategies again was pretend it didn't happen. Just push it down. Pretend that didn't occur.
So, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. I know, I mean, it's just such a tragic story of and as you're sharing that, we mentioned off camera, I have kids, and, for anybody that's teenager, there is that impressionability. There's this can happen to anyone. And this is a cautionary tale of that. And, I find myself as I'm thinking through your story of probably the same questions you have in your mind as that's happening or as you're coming out of it. And it's why. And that may be a useless question, but is that something that you were pondering at the time? And did you ever, were you able to wrestle with that through all the way for the why that happened? Like why off the plane? Why these guys were coming after a teenage girl off the plane,
I did have those thoughts for a while. It wasn't just why, it was more like blaming God. I told you I would be good. I asked you to make me free, but I'm not free. It's worse than before. Why me kind of thing. But look, we get an answer to the question we ask. I had this brilliant mother who taught me super insightful things. She was into spirituality and teaching us in that Socratic method. She was a teacher who later became a university professor, and she taught teachers and as well as students. And she would teach me not what to think. She never was interested that I thought the same thing as her, but how to think. So rather than answering a question, it would be asking a question back to me. Well, what do you think? And why do you think that? And one of the things I remember her teaching me was we get an answer to the question we ask. And the question, why me? Why did you forsake me? Why did you betray me, God? Why did you leave me? God, I tell you, that has there's a ramification of asking that kind of question. It led down a very slippery slope. The why me is a downward spiral question. And it was like, it was an inquiry that was leading me darker and darker and darker. And I thought, I cannot continue in this existence. Having the hell screaming between my ears, that's one thing. But now polarizing myself and putting myself opposite God, the universe, whatever. And that's my enemy now? No, it was just too dark an inquiry. And I had to stop asking that question. And I wasn't able to yet get to, well, why not me? Or some happy,
right.
like,
Yeah.
Sometimes I see stuff like online when I've been in like the darkest moments and people are like, choose happy. Uh,
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Right.
How do you choose happy? You
Right.
can't get to happy from I'm in hell.
Yeah.
You can't. It's too big of a leap.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
can't just choose happy. It doesn't work that way. Okay, I'm in abject hell. I can get to, okay, I'm going to let it go for 30 seconds. You know what I mean? Incremental baby steps. But I had read books about forgiveness, and I had read things like Viktor Frankl, and what I knew I needed at that point was to roll up my sleeves and figure it out.
Hmm.
And at least I had the foresight to recognize, look, I'm not the first person to go through something hard. People have
Hmm.
been way worse than I have. I just want to find those people and talk to them.
Right. Yeah.
And for some grace of God, I started volunteering at old age homes. And I thought, because at first I was like, well, that old phrase about when you're going through something hard, find somebody who's got it worse and help them. My mom taught me that again. And I thought, well, who's got it worse than me? I'm young and screwed in the head. I have no future. Oh, old screwed in the head and have no future. Nobody listens to old people in this country. Nobody gives a dang about them. Let me go listen to them. I've always liked my grandma and her best friends. Okay. And they just wanted to talk. And the great thing was, when I was listening to them talk, I wasn't listening to my own internal dialogue about how do I get back at these sons of guns and what do I do and how am I going to hide from people, how ruined I am, and all that nonsense. Why have you forsaken me, God? All that hogwash that I kept talking. I just listened to these people. And eventually, I could see there were Holocaust survivors, war vets, survivors of horrors of all kinds. And I thought, look, there are these ones that have gone on to live happy, productive, fruitful lives, and others who understandably were angry and bitter and never overcame. Why? And that was the why question I became interested in. And that was the why that I made my obsession. Why? And I started asking. And they wanted to talk because finally someone would hear them. And I started jotting down what I considered to be the most seminal things and codifying it into an education because I had to. I truly had gotten so dark that I started at one point saying, I understand. I have empathy for people who end it all. Now, look, if you're in that place, I have to say, call a suicide prevention hotline. There is help. But I knew I couldn't stay there. It's too dark. And I was like, I've got to get, like, if they're breadcrumbs, the people thing I'm learning from the old people, little things that I can try on and do. And surprisingly, it worked. I kept applying all the things I learned from them, all the to-dos, and stop doing all the not to-dos. Like that negative line of inquiry, like, why have you let me down? And all that, I just had to stop doing that and rather do these things instead. And once I really felt strong, like I was on my feet and had gotten through to the other side, at least by and large, I started testing out what I had learned with other survivors of violent crime, trafficking, rape, sexual assault, all that. And it was working for them as well. And I thought, I'm on to something here. We don't have to endure the post adversity hell. We don't. Now, everybody deals with trauma in life. It sure could be a spectrum, but it could impact us just as much to be the child of divorce as it might be to lose a limb. I don't know. Who's to say? It's very subjective. It is, but we all experience stuff that we hadn't chosen.
Yeah.
And
It's all in how we experience it up here.
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, God, I just want to give this away, because every time I would help those other survivors, I would feel better too. That adage about helping others really is true.
Yeah. Leaning into service, leaning into serving others. What was it? What were some of the lessons that you did learn from the elderly people that help that you adopted in order to maybe help you heal through that?
A lot of it had to do with forgiveness, but again, it's this incremental steps up a ladder. It's not like, again, from the depths of hell to happy, happy, joy, joy, puppies and kittens and stuff. But rather it was, I realized I couldn't get to embracing something from hating it, but I could walk up a ladder and I could go from hating something to tolerating it. But authentically, like I'll tolerate it for a minute, just for a minute. I'm just going to allow it to just be there, and I'll suffer through it for a minute, and then making that period of time longer, and then moving from tolerating, because let's face it, it's not a particularly high state,
Sure.
to letting it just be.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving up to, like, God, it was so hard, so dense during those first few steps, those first few rungs of the ladder. Getting to just not hating, from just not hating to not hating, to tolerating, to letting it be, to, whoa, acceptance. It started to become easier. And I'll just go to, for 1 second, if I could get to one flicker of just actual acceptance, then just screw that. And then I kept going up and down the ladder for a minute. But when I could authentically get to accept, it wasn't that far from accept to embrace. Like the chasm between hate and be willing not to hate for 1 nanosecond was massive. But acceptance to embrace was like quite quick. And then to actually choose this, like I'm the author of it. Like if I had it to do over again, hell yes to that. Because if I think about the girl lying there among the cow and horse patties on the ground in the pasture there, looking up at the plains, I just wanted something to give people. That's the most fundamental longing of a human being, as far as I can tell. The ability to contribute in some way and have our life make a difference. And suddenly, here I've got this way. I didn't prefer the way, but I can now choose it. And then at that point, when we get to embrace or choice in the matter, every gift that the adversity held can be released. And that there's some profundity to that. That is where life gets magical.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, when, as you're saying that, I envision, my former self in 2 decades ago in the midst of alcoholism, which was a self-inflicted trauma. Yours was very different.
But it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
It doesn't. Yeah. It's, and if from 2 decades ago, I would have looked at embrace this.
Yeah.
What a load of horse crap. It's at this point in time, I can totally relate. Because I see the power of the embrace side of it after acceptance. Can you kind of share a little bit of your experience with the embrace side of it? Because that side I know is hard to get to. And I know you have to go through tolerance, acceptance, but what does embrace look like to you on that front?
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey.
There's something about what, in terms of the gifts that the adversity, the circumstances that we would never have chosen for ourselves, the gifts that they can bestow, they only bestow them when we're the author of the experience. Like we would have held the pen and written that, no matter what, despite all and including all. And that stage of embrace is starting to speculate, well, if there were some upside, if there were a gift, what would it be? And now for some, it's like, well, but this person died. How can there be a gift there? Okay, I get that. And it's harder sometimes than others. But look, none of us know how long we've got on this ride in this self that we are right now, right? We none of us have any clarity or certainty, and any thought to the contrary is an illusion. If this were all there was, if this were it, could I be satisfied and delighted as a place to stand, as a declaration? And ultimately that space of embrace is a declaration, right? It's like, because I say so, and because I know the quality of life when I'm a victim to the circumstance versus when I am the author of it.
That's so powerful. It's so eloquently stated and so difficult to obviously get to that point. But the fact that you've gone through what you've gone through and did the work to come out the other side, to heal, to build in that healing, to ultimately embrace it, to choose it, to author it, gives a framework for others to do the same. And it's been a path, at least from what I've seen of your work here, where you've elevated to that embrace point and to a point where you are now sharing that story as a mechanism to help heal others. Has that sharing of others helped to contribute to you healing as well?
For a long time, I insisted that I wouldn't share for all the reasons I said previously, that people would know how broken I was. And I didn't want to share that. And then I started creating this, I created this work to help people overcome adversity. I wrote a couple books on it. I was helping people do that. I got trained to lead personal development programs, and I led them for tens of thousands of people over many years while never sharing my own story. Now, at the time, one of the things I did to overcome was I always loved to write and create stories in my head, but I started putting them down on paper, and I miraculously got them developed by TV networks, and then I sold them. And I'm like, I'm a cowgirl from Colorado. Who in the hell? How is this even possible? But it was. I wrote some stuff with a partner. I wrote other stuff on my own. it happened. And I was writing network TV for the big studios and networks. And I thought, God, you know what? There's this power that major media has to shape the way we think, what we talk about. Those water cooler moments where everyone in the country or everyone in the world is talking about the same thing at the same time. I thought, man, it was like this light bulb, like in a cartoon. What if I got the message about overcoming adversity and my work on it? You don't have to stay stuck in trauma. What if I got that work out to the world via major media? That would be brilliant. I should do that. And now at the time, again, I wasn't sharing my story. And I started out on this path, and even though I was connected in some remote regard, I mean, I wrote TV for these places. It took me a decade to get my own message out to the world. And I'm convinced that part of that problem was because I wasn't sharing my own story. And then I finally just was like, why am I holding back? I am no longer a child who's running for my life. I'm no longer worried that someone's going to come after me and hunt me down. It's time. And I started sharing my own story, but I didn't know how to share it at that time in a way that didn't leave people, deeply concerned for me. There's a way to share that leaves people with a triumph versus the, oh my God, either like wanting to run away or feeling so deeply sorry for me that they're just like, oh, and they're weeping. And now they've got their own incident about my incident. It's not helping anybody.
Yeah. People want to root for you. They don't, they don't want to feel like they need to help you or in some respects, right?
Or hide from you and moving forward.
Sure.
Oh God, let's hope that never comes up again. That was so damn uncomfortable. It's like I knew how to write TV, but I still didn't know how to share my own story. And finally I thought, you know what? I'm just going to be transparent. Like, you're so brilliant about that. It's like, come what may. I stayed up one night and literally looked at myself in the mirror for hours, having a conversation with myself in the mirror. And I said, am I going to do this? Am I actually going to do this? Well, why wouldn't I? Well, because of the whole, I'm filthy, I'm dirty. I no longer believe that. That's just a bunch of hogwash. I'm not going to believe that any longer. Well, why else wouldn't I? Well, what I was afraid of initially is people would say, how dare you not see justice served and let these guys back on the street? I ran for my life. That was all I could do at that time. And I now today could answer that question. I couldn't have answered it then. And I went through all the reasons, and I just finally said, good grief. What am I, protecting these sons of guns? No. I'm going to share my story so that it would help people. And I started sharing, and I've never looked back. And I've been asked some crazy ass questions. I got one of the first interviews I did on TV. The woman goes, yeah.
Oh, really?
The inflection is all mine, not hers, but kinda like, at some point, didn't you realize this was a pretty stupid thing to do? Kind of like this. And I thought, this fire came out inside of me. And because I'd been working with a lot of survivors at this point, and I could see that there's a theme where survivors don't share their stories. And I'd started doing public speaking at this point, the TED Talks and all this stuff. And every time people would line up afterward and say, I've never told anyone, but, and I speak at schools. And that's the most common thing anyone says. I've never told this to anyone.
Yeah.
And I went to this journalist, and the victim is never to blame. That is a common phenomenon. But if we make that their problem, We don't solve the problem as a human race. It is not the problem of it. Anyway, I went off on a bit of a diatribe there.
Sure.
And I thought, oh, I'm never going to be invited back again. But on the contrary,
yeah.
as they
You share
say
the
in
truth enough.
television,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
like conflict is king in a way.
Yes.
So it was like, oh, ratings, let's bring her back.
Yeah. But the truth does prevail in those instances. You know, if you have the courage to share it, you know, as dumb as the questions may be sometimes, hope, you know, the truth will prevail. And it sounds like it did. I mean, I've seen, you've had so many different interviews on different networks, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, all sorts of doctors too. Yeah. No.
All the doctors.
Yeah. All the doctors.
Dr. Drew, right.
Dr. Drew.
Oh
That's
God,
right.
I forgot about Dr. Drew. Yes. You know, there was when I was, just to circle around and complete that last anecdote there, you know, it wasn't that I was rallying against this journalist. She didn't know any better, you know, but or even like trying to vindicate myself. I had healed. But one of the first interviews I ever saw, there was this guy, Piers Morgan, who used to be on CNN, with a victim that really stuck out to me. She was, I don't know what she had survived, but some kind of assault or violent crime or something like this. And they were asking her questions about a crime that was happening right then. And God bless her, she was like a deer in the headlights. She was still traumatized and being re-traumatized through the interview. And I thought, I'm on the other side now. And in service of every survivor who has felt that they have no voice, I must speak up and I must set the record straight, because that is a very common phenomenon where people don't share what's occurred. They find themselves culpable in some way. They think that it happened because of them. And I wanted to set the record straight. But back to your original question about sharing my own story, you know, it set not only me free, but I found in the sharing of it provided something for other people. And so I vowed to forever share as much as it provides anything for people. And once I did really get my message out, like you'd said, through all the various doctors on television, et cetera, and I was, you know, hundreds of millions of views and things like this, I thought, let me really analyze here. Is helping people overcome trauma what I am best served to do? And after some real introspection, I realized there's an entire industry dedicated to helping people overcome adversity. I'm going to leave that to mental health care practitioners and professionals. There's nothing that helps mission-driven people who want to change the world with their story, with their work, with their brand. There's nothing that helps them get out in front of the world via media. If it took me a damn decade and I was connected, people don't stand a snowball chance in hell, as we used to say on the ranch, of getting out there. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do now. And I gathered together the TV producers that I'd become friends with over the years, directors, producers, journalists, et cetera, and said, what do you all think about encircling people with a mission that want to change life for the people they serve? And to a person, they all said, that's why I got into media. That's why I'm here.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And I mean, I eat and I see that, I see the correlation too, of the idea that even though you kind of got out of the business of overcoming adversity and overcoming trauma, I think it seems like you're still in it in that regard, because you're helping people to bring their stories forward. And I know how powerful it is to share a story and find some healing, even as you're helping others. That's the beauty of this message too, is now you're in that world with Magnify Your Message to help people to bring their stories forth on major media.
You know, I truly believe, Adam, I mean, you know the transformative power of story from your own story and the work that you do and helping people recognize that fear is just another one of those hurdles, and we can own all those parts of ourselves and share them so beautifully like you do. Mm-hmm. There's this transformative power in sharing. And I truly believe that every problem that we face as a human race could be solved if the people doing good work had a platform, had a way to share their voice, had a way to reach those who wanted their help.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you found in that work, have you found that other people have brought forth that healing in themselves? Have you seen that happen within them? And by proxy, has that brought more healing to you? I can imagine that, that the trauma of an event that you've experienced, it's there's obviously levels of healing that come from it. And is it something that you continuously see healing over and growth?
Absolutely. And some of our clients, like I was speaking with a client yesterday who's a dentist who created a device to stop concussion because he wanted to keep his own kids safe. And it's now been patented, and he's getting it out there for our armed forces and all these sports teams. And it's really phenomenal. But a large percentage of the people that we work with are people who've got a story.
Yeah.
And one of them that, again, I spoke with yesterday, his name is John Michael Lander, and he was a gold medalist in the World Games, platform diver, and Olympic bound. And yet he had this secret. He'd been groomed and trafficked by his coaches and those entrusted with his care. And when he came to us, I spoke with him on the phone. Now, God bless, we've got a team now that helps people so we can serve more people. But I spoke to him, and he talked about the fact that nobody's ever believed him and how he's tried to get rid of and give away and sell those gold medals, but he's been unable to unload them because they represent so much pain. And I remember I put the phone on mute and just wept. Like, how could this be? How could this happen where people have so little regard for the plight of a survivor? And I know I can help him. So I told him so. And he has now been featured all over, from Time Magazine profile to 60 Minutes to he's in a new George Clooney documentary about the Ohio State scandal. He's actually from there. He's addressed Congress. He's now working with the FBI on training agents to recognize trafficking. He's working with the Olympics on what predatorial grooming is. I mean, what this man has been able to accomplish, to go from not believed and silent to being, as he says, a voice for the voiceless. Every time I have a conversation with him, I just get moved to tears. It is absolutely healing and therapeutic every single time. And I think every time, look, for some of us, I recognized in my own journey that the final step in healing was to share my own story and to do it candidly. And for some of us, sharing our story is with a counselor or a clergyman or woman, and it may be with a support group. For others, they want to share finally with their family or loved ones. And then there are those who want to share their story with the world. And that's not everybody. But for those that it is, nothing short of doing that will suffice.
Yeah. Oh, that gives me chills. It's there's so much power in story and sharing it. And just as a side note, as you're talking about these stories of trafficking, it blows my mind that this is still happening in the 21st century in
Right?
the world, in this world we live in, and it's still largely just not being addressed to the extent that it is. So that the work that you're doing, I mean, helps to heal through that.
Adam, thank you.
Yeah, it's it just blows my mind. Yeah, I as far as the magnifier message, how does that work? How do you work with people that are coming to you to want to start sharing their stories and bring them to the world? What does that process look like? And yeah,
There is, so it depends. I mean, a lot of people, everybody that we work with wants to make a difference in the world with their work. Now, whether their work is a message, like in the case of John Michael, or if it's a service or a product, like in the case of Dr. Hutchinson, the one with the mouth guard that I was talking about that sits
Yeah.
on the bottom jaw. It's whatever it is, they want to help people. So first we find out, are you are you someone who wants to help people with your work? I can't pretend that major media only features people that want to help others, but I sure as heck can say that that's who we help.
Sure. Right.
And then when we help with messaging to start out with, look, I thought I knew everything in the world there was about messaging. I was completely wrong. I thought, well, the heck, I'm a writer, for gosh sakes. I know how to do that. I didn't know how to message for media. That's a whole different animal. I got to learn how to do sound bites and talking points and a compelling core message, all this stuff I had no idea how to do. So we help with messaging, we media train, we find out what do you want to accomplish? And we start from there, whether it's media training and meeting gatekeepers, or it's, just helping you get some initial features, whatever. It starts with, what difference do you want to make in the world? We tend to look at these major media gatekeepers like they're big meanies who are keeping me out. Well, yeah, they're keeping you out because their jobs are on the line. Every time they pitch someone up the food chain, literally, they can get in trouble if you don't knock it out of the park. So we make sure, if you're going for TV, you're media trained. If we're introducing you to a gatekeeper, you know how to speak their language, sound bites, and news you can use for their audience, and all those things. That it just depends, whatever you want. We help close the gap between where you are and the media that would get you there.
Yeah. So if you do go up there with Pierce Morgan, you can knock him down when he tries to. Yeah.
I am not healed, that woman could have said. It's we tend to look at these gatekeepers as these impenetrable forces of these just, like I'd said, big mean pillars or something. But there's probably 50 or more that my team and I work with, and that are actually team members, and they're people with families and goals and reasons that they got into media, and they want to help. They want to make media great. They want to help their audience live better lives. And if you can find out how to give them exactly that, you're ahead of the game.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just so inspired by everything that you're doing and the way that you are doing it here. As I mean, like I said, it's the second that I started looking and learning more about you, and I just went down this rabbit hole of just amazing inspiration and beauty in your story, and from the tragedy, growing out of that to what you've become, to healing, to what you are, to helping others do the same and bring that message outward. It's exponential, that kind of thing that happens. And as we kind of wrap up here, I can continue talking to you for hours. But how, there may be somebody listening out there, and I'm sure there's people that have listened to any one of the interviews that you've had who have felt that in their own heart. They have this trauma, this thing that they've suppressed, this thing that they've pushed down, this pain that they feel shame about, or hurt, or fear, or whatever it may be. How would you invite them to start to bring that message forward?
Well, I've got ton of things that I offer. I have a ton of free resources. Some people just want to share. I've written a couple books on overcoming adversity and starting to share your message in that way. And if you have Amazon Prime, I get no kickback from this. I'm not saying it for that reason. You can download a Kindle for free, I think. I don't know. But, you could go consume those things. I have a Facebook group where I help people learn how to get into media. I do from time to time free master classes where I'll offer insight and guidance on how you can do that. Or if you want to become a client, we have got that option as well. I wanted to make sure everybody's served depending on what it is that's going to make a difference for you and what you want. And if it's overcoming adversity, I've written books on that. If it's really starting to share your message, there's tons of resources I've created that are free that you could consume or find a way to work with us directly. Just whatever fills your heart.
Yeah, I think the example that you're showing too, that there is hope beyond this feeling of hopelessness, is so powerful. And people, I know if you're looking for that major media, if you're trying to get your message out there and find that platform and you have a message to share, go to Magnify Your Message. And where can people find that? What's the website?
My website is CherylHunter.com. We also have MagnifyYourMessage.com either.
Okay. So CherylHunter.com.
CHERYL is how you spell my name. Yep.
Excellent. So CherylHunter.com, Magnify Your Message, number of books, including the newly released book, Greenhorn, which, what is that? What's the story behind that one, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I've got, I wrote I grew up, as you know, in remote Colorado, but it was called the Greenhorn Valley, named after a Comanche chief who became the chief as a teenager. His name was Greenhorn. And I wrote during the last writer's strike back in 2007, 2008. I had a show at CBS at the time that I had written and sold. And I wrote it then when we were on strike. And it's a young adult book, supernatural storyline about a coming of age of Chief Greenhorn and a girl in the Colorado Rockies on a horse ranch.
That's great. So pick that up. You are a person of so many talents, writing and storytelling, and you tell your story so beautifully. And it's so helpful to so many people. So I'm so grateful that you spent some time with me today, Cheryl. And I encourage anybody out there to just go to CherylHunter.com, go to Magnify Your Message, check out her TED Talk as a starting point, just to learn more about her. Just such an amazing message. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been amazing.
It's a joy.
Thank you. To everyone else out there, thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.